This video was made possible thanks to the support of our amazing patrons. We couldn't do this without you.
Don't forget that you can support the channel for free and receive 10% off orders over $10 at Flipside Gaming by using the promo code Affinity at the checkout. Or if TCG Player or Magic Madhouse are more your thing, then be sure to place your order through our affiliate links in the description. Once again, at no extra cost to yourselves.
Hello everybody and welcome to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. I'm Martin.
And I'm Alex.
Today we are once again joined by Andrew, better known as MTG Mudster, and Daniel, who you may recognise as one of the slow-mo guys. If you didn't see our first video featuring these two fine gentlemen, then be sure to check it out. But that's all in the past, and today we have another game for you to enjoy. So without further ado, let's take a look at those opening hands. I am playing my Anje Falconwrath Madness and Discard deck. I keep an opening hand consisting of Faith of the Devoted, Anger, Muldrotha, Gaia Reach Sanitarium, Exotic Orchard, Rakdos Guildgate and a Swamp.
I'm playing my Chulane Teller of Tales Good Stuff deck. Why, you ask? For the banter, of course. I keep an opening hand of Llanowar Elves, Selesnya Signet, Gift of Estates, Rhystic Study, Flooded Strand, a Plains and a Forest.
Andrew is playing his Horde of Notions Elemental Tribal deck and keeps an opening hand containing Thunderkin Awakener, Unsubstantiate, Birthing Pod, Flooded Strand, Hinterland Harbour, Windswept Heath and Breeding Pool.
And finally, Daniel is playing his Muldrotha the Gravetide Reanimated deck. His opening hand is composed of Playcrafter, Targam Sidisi's Hand, Prismatic Vista, Flooded Grove, an Island and a Swamp.
Alex wins the die roll and plays a Forest. He then casts Llanowar Elves and passes to Daniel.
Daniel plays Watery Grave, having the land entered tapped, and passes the turn.
I play Rakdos Guildgate and end my turn.
Andrew plays Breeding Pool, having the land entered tapped, and passes to me.
Alex plays a Plains and casts Selesnya Signet. He then moves to combat, attacking Daniel with his elves, and passes the turn.
Daniel plays Flooded Grove, and ends his turn.
I play a Swamp and cast Sol Ring. I then cast Faith of the Devoted, and pass to Andrew.
Andrew plays Flooded Strand, paying a life to sacrifice it and put Steam Vent into play tapped from his library. With nothing else to do, Andrew passes the turn.
Alex also plays Flooded Strand, paying 1 life and sacrificing it to search his library for an island and puts it onto the battlefield. Next he casts Rhystic Study, upsetting everybody else at the table, and moves to combat. Here he attacks me with his elves, stealing me 1 damage, and ends his turn.
Daniel plays an island and casts Dryad of the Elysian Grove. He decides not to pay for my Rhystic Study, allowing me to draw a card. Next Daniel plays a Swamp, and passes to Martin.
I begin my turn by casting my commander, Anje Falconwrath. I pay the 1 for Rhystic Study and then activate Anje's ability, discarding Muldrotha. I untap my vampire given that the discarded spell has madness and pay 1 to Faith of the Devoted's ability. Each of my opponents lose 2 life, I gain 2 life and I pass the turn.
Andrew plays Hinterland Harbour and casts Birthing Pod, letting me draw from my study. Out of mana, Andrew then ends his turn.
Alex plays Canopy Vista and casts his commander, Chulane Teller of Tales. Moving to combat, Alex attacks Andrew with Llanowar Elves, dealing him a cheeky point of damage and passes to Daniel.
Daniel plays Prismatic Vista, which he taps for a blue thanks to his Dryad, and casts Peregrine Drake. He doesn't pay the Rhystic Study tax, allowing me to draw and untaps his lands. Such a silly card. Not yet finished, Daniel casts Tatiova, Benthic Druid, and I draw once more. Daniel then passes the turn, to which Martin responds by discarding Anger with Anje's ability. He draws a card and then proceeds to his turn.
I play Gaia Reach Sanitarium and activate my commander's ability. I discard Abandon Reason, drawing a card, untapping Anje and draining my opponents for 2 of my enchantment. Next I cast Burn Miser, letting Alex draw a card and end my turn.
Andrew starts his turn by playing Windswept Heath, immediately paying a life and sacrificing it to put Godless Shrine into play. He pays a further 2 life to have the land enter untapped, and then casts Thunderkin Awakener, paying the 1 for Rhystic Study. Not yet finished, Andrew pays 2 life and then sacrifices his Awakener to a Birthing Pod. He searches his library for Risen Reef, putting the elemental into play, and reveals the top card of his library to be a swamp, putting it into play with the Reef's ETB. Happy with his turn, Andrew passes to me.
Alex plays a Plains and casts Mist Meadow Witch. He draws a card and puts an island into play with Chulane's ability, and then casts Pier, Imaginative Rascal. Alex draws once again, putting another island onto the battlefield, and searches his library for Toothy, Imaginary Friend, putting the illusion into his hand. With nothing more to do, Alex discards down to 7 and passes the turn.
Daniel pays a life and sacrifices his Prismatic Vista to put a forest into play. He draws a card and gains a life with Tatio's ability, and plays Breeding Pool, paying 2 life to have it enter untapped. Daniel draws once more, gaining another life, and casts Oko, Thief of Crowns. Damn, Daniel! I draw a card from my study, and Daniel uses Oko's +1 ability to turn Mist Meadow Witch into a 3/3 elk. Next, he casts Plaguecrafter, and Martin responds by discarding a swamp to Anje's ability. He draws a card, adds 2 black mana to his mana pool with Bone Miser, and drains everybody for 2 with Faith of the Devoted. Plaguecrafter's ability then resolves, and everybody sacrifices a creature. Daniel sacrifices the Crafter, Martin sacrifices Anje, Andrew sacrifices his Reef, and I sacrifice my Elk. Moving to combat, Daniel attacks me with Peregrine Drake, dealing me 2 damage, and then ends his turn.
I play a Mountain, finally fulfilling the requirements of the anger in my graveyard, which gives all of my creatures haste. Next I recast my commander, paying 1 for the Rhystic Study, and move to combat. Here I attack Alex with Bone Miser, dealing him 4 damage, and pass to Andrew.
Andrew plays Isolated Chapel, and then casts his commander, Horde of Notions. He pays the 1 for Rhystic Study, and then moves to combat, attacking Martin with his Hasty Elemental. Martin blocks with his commander and then activates her ability. He discards a land, draws a card, adds 2 black mana to his mana pool, and drains everybody for 2 with his enchantment. Horde of Notions then destroys the Mad Vampire, dealing Martin 2 damage, and Andrew passes the turn. I respond by flashing an Aven Mind Sensor, drawing a card with my commander's ability. I then put Selesnia's Sanctuary into play, returning a forest to my hand, and move to my turn.
Alex plays a familiar looking forest and casts Toothy, Imaginary Friend. He draws, puts Command Tower onto the battlefield, and moves to combat. Here he attacks Oko with his Aven, dealing the Planeswalker 2 damage, and ends his turn.
Daniel starts his turn by using Oko's +1 ability, targeting the Aven Mind Sensor. I respond by activating my commander's ability, returning the bird person to my hand, and the Planeswalker's ability fizzles. No elk related shenanigans for you this turn, thank you very much. Not to be deterred, Daniel casts his commander, Muldrotha the Gravetide. He lets me draw from my Rhystic Study's trigger, putting 2 +1/+1 counters on Toothy, and plays Lotus Field, sacrificing a swamp and a forest to its ETB effect. Daniel then draws a card and gains a life thanks to Tatiova, and plays Mosswall Bridge. He exiles one of the top 4 cards of his library underneath the bridge for later use, draws, and gains a life. Daniel then passes to Martin.
I play Exotic Orchard and recast my commander for a 3rd time. I don't pay the Rhystic Study tax, allowing Alex to draw, and Alex puts another 2 +1/+1 counters on his illusion. I then pass the turn.
In his upkeep, Andrew casts Eladamri's Call, allowing me to draw with my study. I then put 2 +1/+1 counters on Toothy, and Andrew searches library for Leafkin Druid before putting it into his hand. Andrew then draws for the turn and plays Watery Grave, paying 2 life to have it enter untapped. He then activates his commander's ability, casting the Thunderkin Awakener in his graveyard and letting me draw once again. Moving to combat, Andrew attacks me with his Awakener, triggering its ability. He has the Risen Reef in his graveyard enter the battlefield tapped and attacking, and puts the top card of his library into his hand with the Reef's ETB. I then block the Reef with Toothy, taking 1 from Thunderkin Awakener, and Andrew ends his turn. I respond by flashing an Aven Mindcensor, drawing a card, and putting a Zorius Chancery into play with Chulane's ability. I return a plane to my hand with the Chancery's ETB trigger, put 2+1/+1 counters on my imaginary friend, and then proceed to my turn.
Alex draws, puts 2+1/+1 counters on Toothy, and casts Reclamation Sage. He targets Faith of the Devoted with the Elf's ability, and I respond by discarding a land to Anje's ability. I add 2 black mana to my mana pool, drain everybody for 2, and put my trusty enchantment into the graveyard. That thing does some real work! Not yet finished, Alex casts Ruin of the Hidden Realm, which has become significantly better with the recent Commander rules change. Alex draws a card, puts a forest into play, puts 2+1/+1 counters on Toothy, and moves to combat. He attacks me with his now 11/11 illusion, and I decide to take the damage like the manly man that I am. Alex then discards down to 7 and passes to Daniel.
Daniel begins his turn by targeting Chulane with Oko's +1 ability. Raise your hand if you've ever been personally victimised by Oko, Thief of Crowns. I respond by returning my commander to my hand with his own ability, and the phase ability fizzles without a target. Daniel then plays the forest in his graveyard, drawing a card and gaining a life. He then plays an island, drawing once more and gaining another life. Not yet finished, Daniel casts Tyrgams to DC's hand, allowing me to draw from my Rhystic Study. Next, he casts Plaguecrafter from his graveyard, once again allowing me to draw. Daniel sacrifices the Shaman to his own ability, Martin sacrifices his commander, Andrew sacrifices Thunderkin Awakener, and I sacrifice Reclamation Sage. With nothing more to do, Daniel passes the turn.
I play Sanctum of Eternity and activate Gaia Reach Sanitarium's ability. Everybody draws and discards, and I cast the Dark Withering that I discarded for its madness cost. I target Rune with the kill spell, and Alex responds by flashing in Restoration Angel, blinking the Rhino with her ETB. Almost had him. I then draw a card with Bone Miser, cycle Baron Moore, and add 2 black mana to my mana pool. Next I cast from under the floorboards, making 3 2/2 zombies that enter tapped and gaining 3 life. Out of mana, I end my turn.
Andrew evokes out Vesperlark, immediately sacrificing it and returning Thunderkin Awakener to the battlefield. Will that thing just stay dead, please? Honestly, so inconsiderate. I draw from my study, put 2+1/+1 counters on Toothy, and Andrew moves to combat. He attacks Martin with his Awakener, returning Vesperlark to play tapped and attacking Martin as well with the Awakener's ability. Andrew then tells Martin if he doesn't block his creatures, he can deal with Rune once and for all. Martin agrees, taking 3 damage, and Andrew moves to his second main phase. Here he casts Omnath, Locust of the Royal, dealing 4 damage to my Rhino, and I draw, putting another 2+1/+1 counters on my imaginary friend. Andrew then moves to his end step, sacrificing Vesperlark and returning Risen Reef to the battlefield with its ability. Yet another creature that won't stay dead. Andrew puts the top card of his library into his hand and then passes to me.
Alex draws, putting 2+1/+1 counters on his illusion, and then plays Glacial Fortress. Next he recasts his commander and casts Karmic Guide. Alex draws, choosing not to put a land into play, and puts 2+1/+1 counters on Toothy. He then returns Rune of the Hidden Realms to the battlefield, causing the rest of the table to sigh deeply. Can nothing just stay in the graveyard this game? I mean really. Moving to combat, Alex attacks me with his massive illusion, and I block with Bone Miser. Alex then moves to his end step, and Daniel responds by flashing in Hermit Druid, paying 1 extra for Rhystic Study. Alex then discards down to 7 and passes the turn.
Instead of drawing, Daniel puts one of the top 3 cards of his library into his hand and the rest into his graveyard thanks to Tyrgram's ability. He then activates Hermit Druid's ability, moving a rather large chunk of cards from his library into his graveyard, before finally hitting an island and putting it into his hand. Next, Daniel activates Oko's +1 ability, turning Rune into a 3/3 Elk. He then plays the Lotus Veil in his graveyard, not to be confused with the Lotus Field that he already has in play. Daniel sacrifices 2 islands, draws a card and gains a life. Not yet finished, he casts the Dream Halls in his graveyard, bending the rules of magic to his whim, and I draw a card and put 2+1/+1 counters on Toothy. Daniel then abuses the heck out of his halls, casting a multitude of cards without draining his supply of mana. He then discards a card to cast Deadeye Navigator, and Anje responds by discarding a card to cast Kindred Summons. He puts Regal Force, Overgrowth Elemental, Unsettled Mariner, and Cloudkin Seer into play from the top of his library and draws 5 cards from Regal Force, 1 card from Cloudkin Seer, and 4 cards from Risen Reef's triggers, but sadly fails to find an answer to Daniel's board state. Daniel then soul bonds his Navigator to his Drake, flickering the flying lizard over and over again to create infinite mana. He then soul bonds Deadeye Navigator to Muldrotha, setting up his infinite combo. To put things simply, Daniel sacrifices a creature to Altar of Dementia, causing an opponent to mill cards. He then recasts the creature with Muldrotha's ability and sacrifices the creature once more. Daniel then flickers Muldrotha, allowing him to recast the creature again and again, milling everybody out until he has won the game.
Well, that's it for another game. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'd like to once again thank both Andrew and Daniel for joining us, and we look forward to playing with you again in the future. Don't forget that you can support the channel for free by liking this video, subscribing, hitting the bell icon and leaving us a comment. I read every one. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook and check out our newly upgraded Patreon tiers. There'll be links to all of these in the description below. That's all for now though, we'll see you next time.